welcome to Play, Watch, Listen. We are currently weekly to try to bring you some lighthearted entertainment during the tough times. Naturally, I am joined by video game composer Austin Wintory, video game actor Troy Baker, and video game director Mike Bithell. How's everyone doing?
Oh, did you do yours more sincerely than Austin?
I went for the boy band 90s
butterfly
look.
chest.
The way you engaged in that to me looked like in GTA 5. I mean, there are plenty of games where you can do it. You can choose like a pose for when you win, and that's how they're animated. It's all like. Nice. That's what it looked like you just did.
He did win the intro.
No, mine was always the it was always that one.
Yeah.
Because it turned into 14. I miss GTA. Like that thing didn't leave my Xbox and play. I think we talked about this before. Like I went from we're going to get into this later based on the topic you picked, Alanah, but I went from Xbox 360 to Xbox One. And then the servers went to shit. And so then I went over to PlayStation and then, so I've like started over, like had to start my rank all over like 3 or 4 times. It was a big ass beating.
I still play that game every week.
Do you really? What do you do the races or what do you do? Because
of Funhouse, we do weekly GTA and I host it. So I actually play GTA probably like 4 hours a week because I test maps. So we do like races or death matches or last man standing, most of which are custom made because we've already done all the previously built ones. So I just like troll through custom made maps, which the community still makes crazy stuff all the time.
Yeah.
I recently found this guy who goes by Sib on the Rockstar Social Club, who basically makes these challenge maps that are like just stupidly hard to finish. Like it's really hard to figure out where to go. They have puzzles that you'd never figure out, and they're just races, like stunt races, but they're just like Super Meat Boy style, like challenging platforming nonsense, and they're super fun. Nice. But then we stream GTA once a week too, so I play a lot of GTA.
My thing were the heists. Like I love the heists so much. But then I'm also the guy that literally I remember the day that I figured out that you could, if you stole a car or in your car, whatever, and you went underneath the overpass for the Air Force Base and you did a U-turn and you hit the ramp at just the right speed, just the right angle, you could jump over it, immediately go to 5 stars, and then you could go into the hangar, steal a jet, and then it was just rain hellfire down on everybody. And it was so great. It felt like playing Vice City where you're like, somebody figured out that you can't really fly in the plane, but if you like did the whole hyperbaric bubble and you just kind of allowed yourself to do that, you can stay up for a while. It felt like calling back to those days. And then because when they, in GTA 4, when they let you, is like, oh, here's a plane you can fly. It's like, it's not fun anymore. The whole point of that game was to break it, which is one of the reasons why I like Snake, bro.
Yeah, one of the hardest missions in San Andreas to me was always the first one where you have to fly a plane because the controls are just so bad. And then I think at the end of the game, one of the latter missions is you're controlling a toy plane, which is also really hard in San Andreas. Like just
they did that in Vice City though too. You did that the Burt Reynolds missions. You went up and had to blow up the big construction site or whatever, and you did that with the toy planes.
Devastatingly had a bug in Vice City where at a certain point in the game, maybe 8 hours in, I would fall through the map every time, no matter what I did. So I never played it again.
Oh, wait a minute. You didn't finish it?
No, I gave up.
You didn't get to the...
Yeah. I finished 3. I finished San Andreas because they were all in this box set when they came to Xbox, and Vice City was in there too. But I could just never finish that game. But I think it did come with the soundtrack. So I had all that dope music.
I had the box set. The box set of like all the different stations on different CDs for Vice City. It's amazing. Yeah.
Did they actually do a remaster of Vice City? Is it a remaster or is it just a re-release for?
Only re-release.
I could just imagine like if they did Vice City as a remaster. They've got the money.
Or just another game set in that era. I mean, it was basically...
That would be their Rockstar play.
It was intended to be Scarface, the game, right? It was pretty close after.
That's what I'm saying. You didn't get to the Scarface moment where you come out and it's the whole big shootout. It's like, oh, it's so great.
If it makes
Austin, do you know what we're talking about?
I only saw Scarface this year.
It's funny. There's like 3 GTAs in a row that I just full on have never played.
I've never played San Andreas. Hands up. Never played San Andreas.
I've never played San Andreas. No.
Never played Ballad of Gay Tony.
No, didn't play
very good.
That's that. Everyone talks about like those are their definitive ones. Like 3, 4 was kind of. I just didn't like Nico Bellic. I didn't care.
You didn't like Nico?
No.
And I also didn't like. I understood his position. Like this, there was a big article that came out after that thing dropped. It was like this wildly successful game, and then the actor, I can't remember his name, who played Nico Bellic, was like, "I only made $100,000 off that game." And at that time, it was like, "Yo, homie, that's not a good look on you." And it just never worked again, because it was like, "Yeah, you also just made $100,000 off that game."
Yeah, exactly.
And I understand that
it's pretty hard to cry over that.
Sure, but it's like. What he was trying to do, he was coming from as a film actor, he was like, or TV, I always get residuals. I'm like, that's not games. There's not a structure for this. And game studios are not. And Mike, we can get into this conversation.
For sure. Let's do it.
Well, should there be a structure for that? Because, I mean, that game was at the time the best-selling game of all time. GTA 5 is now, and I've also heard that Rockstar haven't played very kindly with the voice cast of GTA 5.
No.
Should there be a residual system?
So let's play that. Yes, because for how people are thinking I'm going to be on the opposite side of this, but for every Red Dead Redemption, Grand Theft Auto 5, Call of Duty, Apex Legends, Fortnite, there are a litany of games
thousands
that barely ship. And so if there is a structure that's put into place that says here is a mandate, that I remember when the strike happened, it was for games that sell, I think it was they said their break even was like 250,000 units. I was like, you're out of your mind. Mm-hmm. It's when Infamous Second Son shipped, their break even, and I hope I'm not telling tales out of school, but their break even was like they needed to sell 3 million to break even. It was a very expensive game. And at that time, you had 7 million PS4 users because it was essentially a launch title. And when its opening week, it sold 2.5, I think it did 2.5 or 3.5 million copies. I was like, so you didn't capture 50% of your market share, and there's no other competition. Like it was a big wake up call, because clearly the game was successful. Clearly the game was good, but it's still like when there's nothing else out there, there's still some people that aren't just going to immediately buy that game. They're going to buy the Call of Duties. They're going to buy the GTAs. They're going to buy the Red Deads. Whether they play them or not, Red Dead Redemption is like one of the lowest completionist rates ever. Yeah. But you didn't even finish Vice City for different reasons. It's a wildly successful game. So my thing is this. If we put a mandate in place, yes, does that tap the people like Rockstar? Yes, but that is one developer out of scores that would literally... What it would end up happening is they would scope their game, and they would hire less actors, so less people would work. So it actually goes against what people wanted to actually do.
Or they would just like get a call from their legal department saying no union talent of any kind. You know, and they would just composers have gone through this similar, because we have all the same parallel considerations, but without the leverage that actors have. So we had to give this stuff up ages ago, because in the film world, similarly, there is residuals that come through the performance royalty associations like ASCAP and BMI, and CSAC in the US, PRS in the UK, et cetera. And these are organizations that collect royalties for composers for secondary market income. So it's like, generally speaking. So like if I score a movie, and it plays on TV later, it's not structurally about the secondary market. It's just kind of how it works out in practical terms. If it plays on TV later, every one of those performances is considered a public performance. And so every play on TV, rather. So I'll get royalties. And part of that is that if you score, a movie like okay, the composer I used to share a studio with, John Debney, scored one of his earliest scores was the movie Hocus Pocus, which every year gets like a little rebirth, and there's like a little mini sort of, let's all watch Hocus Pocus. He also did Elf, which happens also the same.
Oh, wow.
Same way. And so it's like every time it plays on TV, he'll make, potentially money, and it's all weighted based on these formulas based on like, is it on a major network in prime time versus an esoteric cable show? Is it on Netflix? Blah 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 blah. And the thing that I think there's no real parallel to any of that in games. Like you said, you sell the game once, and for most people, that's it. That's the only time the developer's ever going to make money. I know that the PRO societies are trying to explore the idea that Twitch could be a comparable thing to a TV airplay, because if someone streams your game,
they're making money off of it.
So it's like there is potentially a market there. Obviously, it would be a fraction of the size of
it's like Spotify
TV. Yeah, kind of. And you know,
in that scenario, Austin, sorry, in that scenario, the idea is that the streamer would pay the composer. Is that what you're saying? Or
well,
you get a cut.
Like the way it works, if it was to be an exact duplicate of like the television model, for example, NBC, and so in this case Twitch, pays an annual license block to ASCAP, and then they basically say, here's all the movies we showed, here's all the TV shows that we did, and you also, as the composer, have to send in your cue sheets, because those things can also be subdivided. You know, like if I co-write a cue, like a main title cue on a show,
there's writers, there's performers, publishing, there's all sorts of different
exactly. So it starts to get super granularized, but it's a pretty big task, and there's a shit ton of money. I mean, both ASCAP and BMI pull in over $1 billion a year in these licenses, and they're both non-profits that are just turning around and paying the vast majority of that back.
Like when we were doing stuff for Retro Replay, I was trying to figure out like how can we, because I wanted to do, like, we did a podcast, and we're going to end the episode with a song. I was like, here's a song that hit me today, and this is These Arms by Paper Kites, whatever. And I wanted to end the podcast with that song. PJ Harsman and Drew Lewis, our two producing partners, were like, dude, you absolutely can do it. We have to pay so much money for that. It's like, do we? So I called up ASCAP, and I called up BMI. I was like, hey, just curious, like if I wanted, and I chose this specific song, I was like, what would that be? He was like, it'd be $500. I went, oh, so it's $500 just to use once? He goes, no. It's $500 a year, and you can use anything you want. I went, what if I want to use like Elton John? He goes, it's $500 for the year. I was like, so that's how, like, I get stuff for the music that I've put up, and if it goes on YouTube or if it goes anything else, every Thursday I get a thing from TuneCore that says, hey, you made 73 cents or whatever. So that's coming off that $500 that whoever pays. I was like, but if it's used, again, for a commercial, or if it's used for a film or something else, that's big money.
Video game.
How extensive is that library? Because, I mean, one of the biggest issues with making content on YouTube is that you often can't use licensed music. For example, I don't know if you guys know, but if a YouTube channel gets 3 strikes, a strike is not a copyright takedown. A strike is like a much more serious, like, offense. If you get 3 strikes, your channel is removed. IGN got its first strike while I was working there because somebody used a Drake song. And that was enough to give the channel a strike. It wasn't just, we're demonetizing this. We literally got striked. You cannot use a Drake song in a YouTube video. And every video on my channel that has ever been demonetized has always been because of music, including video game music. I had a Heavy Rain playthrough was the first thing I ever recorded. It's so bad. It's so old. But all of that got demonetized because of the music in the game.
And often it'll be a third party as well claiming that.
Yeah. Sometimes it's a mistake.
The worst is when it's automated. That's the thing that sucks. It's not even someone going after you. It's literally just like an algorithm. Like I tried to upload my own music. I won't say which project it is, but I always upload little snippets of things to like SoundCloud, and one of them got blocked before it even uploaded. And it was like, and I wrote and I said, I'm the composer. I have the permission of the publisher. And they were like, nah, it's just like there's a standing block from that publisher.
But then what do you pay? What do I, as the content creator, as the channel owner, what do I pay ASCAP and BMI for?
I don't really know. Like, that's the first that I've heard that you can do that, because at Funhouse or Rooster Teeth in general, we do have a music library that we pay to use, but none of it is like popularly licensed music. It's all just background music.
It's like royalty-free stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And it's still a really cool asset for us, and we use it all the time. It's and the one that we use specifically, like you can search like, I want it to sound electronic, and I want it to have this kind of, and I want vocals, and you can be very specific. So finding stuff for background music is really, really helpful for that. But in terms of using licensed music, we just absolutely can't do it. In some cases, you can't even sing because if they somehow recognize the notes that you're singing, it can get a copyright takedown basically, but I've also had videos get copyright strikes because someone else on YouTube, some other YouTuber, did a playthrough of a game, and then their management team decided to copyright everything that they had done, and the algorithm thought they were copyrighting every part of that gameplay rather than just that person's exact video. So they've just accidentally taken over entire video games as an individual
I've had that.
YouTuber.
We had that with Thomas Was Alone. Thomas Was Alone has like a generative soundtrack, so it's randomized. Generative's overstating it, but it's randomized in terms of which parts it pulls in at runtime. And we had someone claimed ownership of like a minute of it under a certain circumstance, and we got to find out exactly how repeating that soundtrack was, because about 1 in 100 YouTube videos of Thomas Was Alone got struck by this and demonetized.
It's a weird one because it's not your fault, but
cool,
when it happened to me, I think it was Man of
it was a
Medan.
really interesting test of the concept. We got to find out how well we'd done with it. Yeah, you're right.
You got an exact stat.
Exactly. Yeah.
Something that is it YouTube just kind of covering their ass? Is that what it is, so that they don't get going out because there's actually no real copyright infringement that's happening, or what is that?
Yes,
it is
the way that
100%,
YouTube does everything is like, right now virtually any video that has any mention of coronavirus is just immediately having no ad revenue, because they're, I guess, worried that some advertisers aren't going to like being associated with that, because right now it's considered political. It's like just stuff like that. They just blanket destroy everyone in hopes of protecting themselves, really. I mean, it's a mega call, but
and they automate it as well, which causes the problems. Like if they actually had like moderation staff who were making smart human decisions, they'd be fine. It's because
they do in some cases, but rarely. But I was going to say, to Austin's point, I used to use a song from a producer called Moon, who some of you might know from the Hotline Miami soundtrack, and I had reached out to him and been like, can I use this particular song as a backing track for my YouTube videos? And he said yes, and I had his permission, but YouTube still took it all down. And then I would fight them on it basically and be like, I have his permission in writing, but they were like, there's no option for you to include a screenshot or a document or anything when you give them your rebuttal. So I was just like, well, I don't know why I even bothered asking. I just
can't. In Austin's case, when you're literally the composer.
Yeah, they're like, no, you're not.
What's so funny is on a daily basis, I get a notice from Instagram saying that a video of yours has been taken down due to copyright infringement. There's a part of your video where you may not own it. And
Instagram, way.
And then I goes, after further review, your video has been reposted. And there's a video that you have that should be taken down, and it's a daily thing where I take it down and put back up, and it's from Warner Brothers Music, I guess, which holds the that specific copyright or publishing for the recording of. Austin, you would know. It's like Ein Klein something. It's a
Eine kleine Nachtmusik.
Yeah, it's like it's some piece of Beethoven that I did a video when I was walking through a city in Switzerland. I was like, oh, this is a beautiful, and I just did this great thing. Look how good I am with an iPhone. Total pretentious like director in a European town, and it's like, you can't use that. I'm like, it's me on holiday, man. What? I got to find the video, and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But
to get layered. Sorry, go ahead, Austin.
No. All I was going to say is, I think a lot of this is because we're still in the kind of growth pains of this medium that a lot of the legal structure is built around. It took 100 years to really work out how radio, TV, movie theaters, DVD, how all of those are interconnected, and how, people can make the most possible money if, their content, like their a movie studio's movie or whatever, is being heavily consumed. Like figure out the channels, and the internet kind of blows all that apart pretty suddenly. And so you have like 90 years worth of infrastructure that is suddenly trying to pivot in like 50 directions at once and just struggling because, to me, the fact that like if your video on YouTube has 5 seconds of copywritten music and it will defer the whole video's ad revenue over to the publisher of that piece, I'm like, we've got to get more sophisticated in our handling of this, because I don't think any reasonable, and the majority of YouTubers and channels like Rooster Teeth and Funhouse and IGN and all these big channels, plus all the smaller YouTubers, I don't think any of them are doing anything you could remotely
Malicious.
describe as stealing. No one has any problem with the idea that like, if there's $100 on the table and I used something that somebody else owns, and like if a few dollars of that gets siphoned off towards that person, like I don't think anybody is going to have any issue with that. It's the idea that it either just gets shut down outright, or the whole $100 suddenly gets redirected. Is also the part that's so strange.
The benefit to budding artists that would like, hey, I broke because someone did this YouTube video that featured my song. To me, it's crippling to the end. This is what I'm talking about. I understand in theory the philosophy behind protecting artists, but in the interest of this, just like with video games, in the interest of doing that, you actually hinder the further advancement for everybody.
Oh, for sure. You want to know a story about that, actually? So
I do.
When Journey came out, I remember when Journey came out, because the game has no dialogue or sound effects there's a lot of actually really great sound design by Steve Johnson, but it's largely subtle. The music does a lot of the audio heavy lifting. So it's like a silent film in many ways. And so Genova, the creative director, had this thought right before it launched. We were planning on releasing the album, day and date, which is normal. But Genova goes, if someone were to listen to this album before they play the game, it's kind of a spoiler of the game's emotional experience. And that's all that the game is an emotional experience. So he goes, we should wait to release the album for like 2 weeks until after the game's been out. It's the only time I've ever done this. And so, so we did. And then the funny thing that happened was, like, the game came out, obviously it had this pretty outrageous response, and people were immediately asking for the album, and some people figured out ways to kind of rip it out of the game and started posting it on YouTube before the official album had been released. And I had never seen people like ravenously trying to get my music before this. I mean, 3 people maybe when Flow came out a few years before that, but not really to this extent. I mean, where videos just instantaneously had tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of hits from ripped game files, like immediately. So I went on all the uploads I could find and left a comment that was like, "Hey, I'm Austin. I wrote this, and I'm thank you so much for sharing it, because like it's so touching to me." And then one day I wake up after a couple days of that, and someone messages me and says, "Hey, have you gone on Reddit today?" I'm like, no. And literally on the
never a call you want to get. You never want to get a call. Never, ever, ever.
Well, this is the one exception then, because literally on the homepage of Reddit, like not even in the sort of gaming subreddit or something like that, on the front page, somebody had noticed that I was doing this and screenshotted a bunch of them and made like a collage and said, composer sees his music on YouTube and doesn't react like a little bitch. That was their caption.
Wow. Wow.
And so of course I comment on that, and it led to kind of an impromptu AMA, and the thing just, it had like thousands of upvotes and shit. And so then and everyone just was shocked that I was touched. And I was like, why would I? No one is sharing it because they are like this modern, Bluebeard pirate who thinks that they're like romantically or like or Robin Hood, like I'll go steal from. Yeah. And so then the crazy thing was that when the album, like so many people said, well, this is so cool. I will buy this on iTunes or whatever when it comes out properly, because like they felt so good about that interaction. And when the thing came out, it fucking charted higher on the Billboard charts than any video game soundtrack ever had before.
No way.
And it was like, You see what happens when you kind of open-armed approach people and say, I see you where you are. I get that you're just trying to share stuff you think is cool. And like, as the person who was involved in making that, that's really touching. And so these draconian systems that are like, oh, no, it's much better to just not allow it than to like explore the nuance. To me, it's baffling, and it's a massive opportunity
and
missed.
They do make you all look like assholes, because people are going to assume that's what the composer wanted, which is an interesting point. I mean, I imagine it's coming from the corporations, but I know with Nintendo and Konami particularly, there are a lot of restrictions for what kind of gameplay you can upload on YouTube. I know Nintendo was relaxed, but I had, back when I was working for a network show in Australia, we had videos that we would put on YouTube get demonetized for even 5 seconds of a Pokemon trailer. it was just a nightmare. And you'd be like, why do you not want to work with us? And then they started this program where you could give them, I think it was automatically 30% of
That's
a
right.
cut.
I remember.
And I mean, there've also been Atlas, who make Persona, had streaming restrictions on Persona 5, where if you got to a certain part in the game, they would automatically demonetize you and in some cases also flag your channel. So that would be like getting a strike on a Twitch stream or whatever, which was done with the intention of removing spoilers, rather than because they just wanted to profit off of people playing the game. It's this really complicated thing. And I mean, Mike, I feel like you're a really good person to ask the question. How do you feel about Let's Plays and streams where your games are concerned? I know the student who made That Dragon Cancer said that they think that Let's Plays dramatically negatively impacted their sales.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can sympathize with their position. Like, I get it. If your game is predominantly as I think that game is, and this is definitely not criticism, but if it's predominantly like an audio-visual storytelling thing, and you can get 95% of the experience of playing it via watching a YouTube video, which is, I presume, their argument for that perspective. So I don't think I'm.
For the record, I don't want to misrepresent that perspective. They were very polite when they spoke about it.
Exactly,
they were just open about it. They were like, we appreciate that everyone has loved this. Thank you for playing it. Yeah.
Yeah, we had I remember we released Subsurface Circular and Quarantine Circular kind of just after that, and I think some similar kind of stories. And we had the same kind of concern internally of because Subsurface Circular, for anyone watching this who's not seen it, it's basically like a dialogue tree, the game. It's a Mass Effect dialogue tree, but for an hour and a half. And with not as much production value. And we were like, this is cool. Thank you.
Always selling his own game. Such a shill.
I'm a brilliant pitch man. It's true. But we had the fit. We were like, this is something where you could watch a video of this, especially with a YouTuber, because the game doesn't have voiceover. It's entirely text-based. If it's an interesting YouTuber who's doing voices and stuff, there's a chance there's actually potentially more entertaining as storytelling on YouTube. So we had that kind of internal conversation. They were going to literally add value to it, and therefore, maybe you watch that and you don't bother to pick up the game. What our decision was when you load up either of those games, there's a little button on the main menu, and you can click saying YouTubers and streamers. If you click on that, it basically takes you to a page which is hey, thanks. So it's similar to what Austin was posting on those comments. Hey, thank you so much for wanting to even consider sharing our stuff. We're really grateful to you for liking it enough. If you do, please tag the video as spoiler if you're going to show the ending, because both of those games kind of have twist endings, and we didn't want that kind of getting around too much. And also, you'd be doing us a massive favor if you only shared kind of the first half of the game, so people want to go and check out more. Just very transparently kind of laying out this entire concern. But at the same time, if you choose to put it all up there, thanks so much for your support, and you're cool, and we're not pissed off at you. Basically was what this thing, it was 5 paragraphs. And I think, and we had similar thing, I mean, not to the same scale as you, Austin, but we had Reddit threads about wow, a developer straight up telling us exactly what their concerns are and blah, 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 blah. And people, I think, responded well to that. And most of the videos of those games literally start with them booting up that disclaimer and describing all of the messaging in it and saying, hey, this is what the developer feels. And in half the cases, they say, we want to play the whole thing, so we're going to, but we wanted to let you know before we start that they want to they want you to experience it this way. So if you want to switch off, so most of them even say, if you want to switch off a video halfway through, feel free. That's the spirit of the video. We're all sharing it. And just created a nice, I think that's it. It's great. It's amazing.
People
and
transparency from devs.
People like grown-ups. People like an adult, normal, also, straightforward, honest conversation. And that's what I think
that people in PR can sometimes forget, and I understand why too, that the people who are streaming and making YouTube videos who are not the traditional media they're used to dealing with generally just really love video games. They generally just really want to share these things with an audience. And the minute they get an email from someone at a publisher, they're going to be like, oh my God, Bethesda sent me an email. I got to tell everyone Bethesda sent me an email and asked for this. I'm absolutely going to comply, because they're so excited to be a part of it. It's not that they just want to make money and want your game to burn to the ground. It's a lot less sinister.
95% of people are decent people, and we should walk through life with that presumption, I think.
I agree.
Be prepared for the 5%, but don't build your entire life and plan around the 5%.
I think it's also critical to be inclusive and to, for lack of a better word, assimilate rather than to distance and punish and seek to try to police people. It's hey, how can we bring you in? And actually support the people that are out there pirating things. The Radiohead is famously been the ones that have always done this. Like, we're just going to put our album out for free. And if you want to buy it, great. Do you remember when they did that? I think it was Hail to the Thief that they did that. They were like, if you guys want to pay for this, great.
Deal,
do you remember when U2 did that on iTunes though? And everyone was like, get this the fuck off.
But that was
they also installed it, right? They also installed it. Yeah.
Which, by the way, if
I've never listened to that album, like it's there on my iTunes. I've never
here's
actually
the deal.
listened to it.
It was such a bad idea.
Oh, good.
Bono was one of the, as to my knowledge, is one of the primary investors in Apple. Like he got in super early. He's the first billionaire musician, and you can say what you want about that man, but he has perennially tried to make this world a better place. Whether you agree with him or not, whether you like his style or not, the man has objectively devoted his life to philanthropy.
Well, and how many KT Curix does he weigh also?
I knew you were going to bring up a South Park reference. He's the biggest dude, or he's the biggest turd ever made, as South Park said. But that was just a little moment for Austin and I. But to be able to say, hey, they have had a long history. Like, they were the first ones on iTunes. I don't know if anybody remembers that or not. They were the first artist on iTunes.
No way.
Yeah, they were that when Steve Jobs launched it, and there's a whole. I wish I could find this article. Steve Jobs said, with a tremendous amount of irony, that his comment didn't necessarily age well. But somebody asked him, "Is like, are you just trying to make money off of music?" And he says, "No, I'm trying to solve a problem within the music industry right now, because if people have no legal option of how to get something that they desperately want, you cannot hold them accountable for stealing it." I was like, yeah. He goes, so somebody wants that song. We pay $1? Sure. And someone said, are you trying to create a new revenue stream? And he goes, we have $3 billion in the bank. Do you really think I care about making money off this? And he really didn't. And the irony of that is that, lo and behold, iTunes became the number one revenue stream. It gave birth to the App Store and everything else. It became the number one thing for Apple as a company, to where they also make, computers.
Yeah.
But they had their own. U2 had their own iPod. They were the one that started the whole Red thing. So I mean, they have a long-standing history. And then all of a sudden they were like, "Hey, we're going to give you our new album." The thing that I applaud U2 for constantly doing is the fact that they will put out shit and they will own it. There's a song called Always that very few people know, because it was a single that they put out and they pulled it back and they re-released it as a song called Brand New Day, right? Because the original song was like, always wear your safety vest, always. It's terrible. It is awful, but they did a fully produced version of it. A Beautiful Day, not Brand New Day, Beautiful Day. And then they were like, what if we pulled this song back and retweaked it and then put it back out again as a much, much better song? So the thing that I think everybody hated about it was not that they forced you to listen to this album, is they forced you to listen to that album, because it's not a good album. It's kind of a shit U2 album, which every once in a while they do. So, but as
do we all. There
is also something slightly invasive about like, this will come on your phone and you can't get rid of it.
I mean, my issue was that I always shuffle my music, and it was shuffling to music that I did not want to listen to. It was like,
there's that Wolf song that was just weird.
Yeah, it was.
I love that we're finally relitigating this. Like, it
this
feels
needs
like
to
the
be
right
discussed
time
right
to be having
now.
this debate.
U2, how
this is the
dare
most
you?
pressing. This is the most pressing issue in the games industry right now, and I'm glad we were here for it. I'm glad we could open up to this audience.
As a
it's
button
play, watch,
on that.
listen.
Listen, you're right.
Be the button, Austin. Be the button.
I can't remember. Well, my final thought on the whole YouTube copyright strikes and all the rest of it. I can't remember if we'd mentioned this before as part of our kind of roundup of 2019. But I remember when I first fired up Control, I did what I always do and go through and like adjust settings and the menus and shit before I even play the game. And I just and I'm always curious what controls they give you, especially in terms of audio remixing. And it's just one of those it's just a professional curiosity, how kind of specific or granular they'll make it. And I saw something in controls menu I had never seen before that was clearly a response to everything that we're talking about, which was there was a box you could tick that said, click here to mute any copywritten music.
So Remedy have had that in their games, I think, since Alan Wake.
Really? Well, Alan Wake was the famous story.
I believe Alan Wake, because Alan Wake has loads of licenses. And as you say, like didn't the licenses run out? So they basically lost it.
Well, no, as I remember, Alan Wake got pulled off of Steam because of the their license expired on the music.
That's right, it did.
But I feel like Alan Wake was one of the first to do that, because I remember noticing it in Alan Wake and thinking exactly what you're saying. Basically, at the moment where YouTube started, this is why Remedy. I love that the world's finally waking up to Remedy being amazing. So good. As like a Remedy apologist forever, I love it. Is it good?
Yes. Sam Lake is just kind of going like, "Oh shucks, you guys."
But it was a clever. It was a clever way to stay.
No, he's not. He's going
ahead.
Like this.
Yeah.
Damn.
There you go. That's my Sam Lake impression. It's a solid Sam Lake impression.
Well, I was gonna ask you guys, as people who have made stuff that I think has been emotionally impactful, I think all three of you have. How do you feel about watching a content creator or someone react to something that you've made live? What is that like? Like watching someone have an emotional response to a game that you've worked on?
Who's going to go first?
Mike, take it away.
Yeah. I hate it. I utterly don't. No, I'm joking. No, it's cool. I totally kind of, if I see people often tag me, and if it's Thomas Was Alone is the one that people still kind of are always Let's Playing, and they'll often tag me in. And if it's like a live stream, I'll sometimes kind of jump in and kind of watch and do like a Q&A in the chat and stuff, which is always fun. But yeah, no, I'm just amazed anyone plays my stuff still. Like that's just always the overwhelming thing for me is like, this person I've not met is aware of Thomas Was Alone. It's the thing I found myself doing the other day for something. I was actually using the wiki for one of my games, like the fan-made kind of encyclopedia-y things, to check a fact about a script I wrote a few years ago, because I couldn't remember like what was the name of I'm not going to say what it was, but what was the name of this thing I had in this other game, and I was checking that. So I'm always just blown away that people play stuff, let alone like it. That's amazing. Awesome. Sounds so humble, but that's genuinely true.
No, makes sense.
I mean, one of the nice things about scoring a game is that it's really easy to it's easy to not fall for the delusion that I made this game, and so I get to when I watch like a Let's Play, it's kind of the closest thing I get to being an actual player of the game, where I get to vicariously feed off of their reaction, because coming at it from the inside, I've never been able to play Journey or Abzu or the Banner Saga or whatever as a player and reacting earnestly, because I know it too much from the inside. So I get to have the closest possible approximation of just being a player of that game while watching someone play it. And I like that a lot. It's fun. It's a way, because they'll do stuff differently than me. It's like their thumbs just don't do the things that my thumbs would do. And so I see things from a perspective that even after 1,000 hours of playtests during development, I somehow never saw exactly that way. And that to me it's just so cool. But the closest kind of like the thing that's unique about my little corner of this is that when someone's really engaged and really love it, they'll make their own covers of the music. And that to me is that's the most astonishing. That's where I'll say all the same things that Mike just said. It blows my mind that people like it at all, but that someone would then go to the trouble of like learning the music. And in most cases they have to do it by ear. And then, sometimes they're so elaborate. And sometimes, like, I remember I wrote all these songs with my tripod pals for Assassin's Creed Syndicate, and like there's multiple Russian YouTubers that have done Russian translations of those songs with like fairly elaborate production value and stuff.
Nice.
And like it's just the craziest thing. So I periodically will go and search on YouTube to see if there's some of those that I never got tagged or no one ever shared, because it's my favorite thing ever to go and comment on those videos and say, even if it's because some of them, they have like 5 hits, like it's something that's just totally undiscovered. And I love I get so much joy going to those people and being like, you have no idea what it means to me that you did this, because that's just there's no greater validation, I think, than stimulating someone else's creativity, especially when they make it totally different than it originally was.
Yeah.
And they're not making it for your attention or your approval or to get a job. They're just passionately creating something that you happen to find. And I love that both of you have said that you go and you comment on these people's stuff, because
100%.
I feel like they must lose their minds
as well, which I guess is similar. Like fan art for me is the thing that just blows my mind, that something that we made is now something that someone, again, would sit down with and in some cases it's like a kidding. I remember doing a talk at a school where one of the tutors at the school brought over like their 8-year-old had written me a letter about their idea of what the Thomas Was Alone sequel should be. So it was like, 8-year-old kind of bio, and they'd laminated it, because laminating something shows that it's important.
Yes.
They'd laminated the whole thing.
Plastic.
Yes.
And
it was just like the sweetest thing. It completely threw me off the talk I was maybe giving at this university, but like it was that stuff is just, it's mind blowing.
Did you respond with a letter from your lawyer saying Bithell Games outside solicitation?
So I wasn't going to go. I was going to leave this out of the story because, again, it makes it sound like a self-serving fucking feel-good story. But like literally, I made I asked the mother to bring me she had like a pad of paper. I was like, can I borrow a pen? And I actually wrote a response letter kind of complimenting the kid on the ideas they'd had and thanking them for their time and stuff like that.
I love that.
Anyway.
That's awesome. That's
how about you, Troy? I imagine there is a whole lot of content of people playing stuff that you've made.
It is always, I kind of resonate with what both Mike and Austin said. It is the closest that I can get to having experienced it from the inside, to be able to look at it from the outside to see what it has meant to someone. And especially with something like The Last of Us. I remember asking Neil, we were on stage and we're discussing the last scene. And I asked him, I was like, aren't you afraid that people are going to hate this? And this is right in the aftermath of, while we were shooting that, was when Mass Effect 3 came out, and there was that whole fallout. And I think we've talked about this before. He said, I don't care if people love it or hate it. I just don't want them to be ambivalent. And to me, that is what I love, is, did we have impact? Everything that all of us are, in some ways, and I've said this before, all of us are storytellers. And by them proxy, all of us are artists, and we're creating art. And the thing that I have learned is that I don't create art for that to serve me. I don't write a song or create a performance so that I feel better, so that I feel like I was a tremendous musician or a wonderful actor or a great writer or a great director. If I do that, I will perpetually find myself dissatisfied, disappointed, and disillusioned with my own abilities.
It's both not worth it and never enough.
It's never enough. So in turn, what I do is I say, there's literally something that I'm working on right now, and Austin knows this too, where I'm starting with something, and it is literally the seed. My art that I can create is one part of it. And what I'm hoping is that we can put this out, and Austin does this as well, put this out there, and I want you to make this better. Can you make this bigger, better, faster, stronger, more impactful? And that to me is what watching someone's reaction video. That is that becomes my art. That's what serves me, is that when I see someone do this, like, it mattered, it had impact. That is the art that serves me. And so that's all that I try to do.
Did you watch like people's reactions to like the Last of Us Part 2 reveal trailer and stuff like that?
Dude, there was nothing. I will never be able to explain or describe this feeling. So we're at PSX, and we were sequestered. Like, they wouldn't let Ashley or I anywhere in public view. We had to come in separately. Especially Ashley, they had her like come around the back. I got there super early, so no one was there. If I was there, it's kind of like, oh, Troy's here. Yeah, Troy's at some PlayStation thing. But if Ashley's there, that's like red flags. So they had to like come in her hoodie and everything, and straight up to our hotel room, so that no one could see us. And same thing backstage. We like walked separately, and then they kept us backstage, and then they showed the trailer. And as they started the trailer, I was like, can we finally go sit down? And they were like, yes, because we had been standing back there for hours. And so finally it was like, we're making our way in the dark as the trailer is playing. And so we're walking past from the back all of the people that are lined up that are actually in attendance in the hall. And so you see people watching the screen, and then they go, And it's like, it was that moment with Han Solo. It's like, it's all real, and people were crying because we're passing and we're like, walking like Moses across the Red Sea. Like, it's going to be okay. And we get to watch this thing, the fruition of what we have been waiting for and working on for so long. And then that is reflected in the eyes of the people that were watching it. And I don't know which was more, this was more impactful for me. So yeah, that was probably the greatest reaction I've ever seen, was when people who had been holding on to hope finally get to see a glimpse of it, saying it's real. What we've been hoping for is real. And I don't know if I'll ever have that moment again.
Yeah, I remember probably not quite as cool, I don't know. One of the Bethesda press conferences recently, maybe 2 years ago now, the devs, after they finished their presentation, their mics were still hot, and they were like, "We killed that!" And I was like, "I'm so glad that we still heard that," because that those people are not like trained public speakers. That a very interesting thing about the games industry is that games take a very long time to make. So for the bulk of that time, nobody has any idea what you're working on. No, right. You can't even talk about what you're doing, and then one day suddenly you can, and then you're allowed to say whatever you want. Like Sean Vanneman, who was one of the writers on Half-Life Alyx, had to be really quiet for a while until they announced that team at Campo Santo went over to it, and then it was negatively received, even though Sean felt very positively about getting to work on Half-Life because he loves Half-Life, is now tweeting and being like, "I'm so happy this thing is out, and I get to talk about it. And the whole world is really enjoying that game because, oh my God, it's incredible." But you only get that moment for a month, and then you go back to silence again.
It's weird. It's really weird.
Yeah.
And especially when it's someone else's secret, because like in the indie space, like you're keeping secrets, but no one cares. Like no one's like, it's not like the Last of Us thing where people are like speculating or wondering what the next thing we're making is. But then you end up directing a John Wick game and you can't tell anyone for a year and a half. And it's just, that was the worst. Especially everyone on this call knows how much of a show off I am. Like I really wanted to tell all the time. It's boring. But like the amount of times I almost told someone, and then sometimes where I absolutely did tell someone. It's weird.
I do believe, though, that there are certain people in this industry, and Mike, you are one of them, where at least people who are privy and savvy to this industry go, I wonder when Mike Bithel's going to make another game. I wonder what game Lucas Pope is working on. I wonder
You're very kind to put me on this list. That's a very
Mike
generous.
Bithell, Ken Levine, the big two.
Yeah, the big.
Well, Lucas as well. Like, I'm definitely not on that level. Lucas is incredible. Like, utter genius.
But I think those are the true. And there's people that I'm sure we could go and add to this list as much as we want to, but
no, don't leave it as it is. I think it's
great. Proof of that is Kojima being it's a Hideo Kojima game, and Hideo's doing another game. So I do think that this industry has those. Auteur feels like a appropriated word, not an appropriate word necessarily, but appropriated word. Because I don't know if that applies, because an auteur evokes a certain kind of context that I don't think apply. We talked about this before, Mike, that I don't think necessarily applies. There's no Orson Welles, unless you're Lucas Pope. There's no Orson Welles in the video game industry. There's just you are someone that is constantly lifting up and showcasing your team.
That's very kind of you to say.
It's something.
But I think that's honest as well. I don't think. I mean, I actually have a problem with auteur theory across the board, because there's never. I mean, short of like novelist and singer-songwriter, there are very few artistic.
Yeah, Toby Fox is one of the only ones in the game industry that I could name.
Who's Toby Fox?
The guy that made Undertale did everything himself.
Absolutely everything.
Yeah.
Like that's. I think it's the responsibility of people who are elevated in that way by the press. It's that classic Warren Spector joke, right, where the article is Warren Spector commenting on people are always too fast to credit one person on its game team. Says Warren Spector brackets thief Deus Ex. Like it's that cliche of like, yeah. And I'm in a weird position as well, because we named the company after me because my name became so kind of strongly associated with Thomas Was Alone that literally people on the team were telling me like, we have to name the company after you because no one has heard of whatever stupid company name you want to come up with now. So I'm in this weird situation where I'm the guy yelling about how auteur theory is bullshit, while having a company named after myself, which is an interestingly hypocritical position to find yourself in.
Yeah, titular or the eponymous is not necessarily synonymous with being on a tour, I don't think.
No, but it can be kind of self-celebratory in a way that I find not good. But yeah, anyway.
I just wanted to look.
Sorry, this is great. I'm saving so much money on psychiatry right now. It's fantastic.
I was pretty sure Doki Doki Literature Club was also made by one person, but it's mostly the one person, which is Dan Salvato. But then also he had two artists as well. Mm-hmm. But like that's a game that won a ton of awards, that did something very unique, that was made by a very, very small group of people. And I love hearing those stories as well, which is obviously a side note, is like people who've single-handedly made games. I have a friend who's working on a sort of stealth sim right now that he's been working on for about 6 years, and it's just him, nobody else. And I love seeing that stuff because I personally like always want to work with a team. I don't like doing things independently really, because I feel like I love learning from other people, and that's just a personal thing. But someone who can make a video game by themselves and make something that's that impressive is just, it's so cool to see for anyone who doesn't have access to a big city or access to other people in the industry, that they can jump into a, I don't know, RPG Maker or whatever it is the devs are using these days to just make something really cool. And that's part of like one of the things that I hope we kind of get out of this period of time where everyone's stuck at home, is just
I think we're going to see so many interesting things. Like, I don't know many people who have the ability and opportunity to do something weird that aren't like, I'm specifically doing something completely new that I've never done before. I know most people seem to be like, I think a lot of people are seeing it as alongside obviously the horrific reality of the situation, like are using the opportunity to do something kind of different. It's kind of breaking them out. It's breaking all of us out of our routines and our patterns, right? Which I think is creatively great.
My sleeping patterns are fucked though.
Oh yeah, no, yeah,
oh
absolutely.
My god, yeah. Went to bed at 5 a.m. and then had to wake up at 9:30 for a conference that I had to cover. That was supposed to be a preview event, but they moved it digital, which is like a really interesting part of how this is working for media, is that they, through Discord, live streamed the conference and had the devs speak over what we were seeing in Discord. That's how they're doing preview events now, because we can't get hands on games. Yeah. And then recorded this, and then I'm going to go back to sleep.
I'm actually really interested. Let's dig in on that, because that's a completely different way of doing preview events. Mm-hmm. How did you find that? Like, what was that like for you, and what did you think it was? What did it seem like it was like for the developers? Like, give us some more insight on that, because that's new.
I think that's how preview events are probably going to go forward for the next 3, 6, 12 months, I don't know, is that we're going to have to see them as live streams. It worked pretty well on Discord. This one was put together by Private Division, who organized it honestly very well, and a lot of people from Tara Bruno PR, who, shout out, very good company.
Smart folks over there, yeah.
Yeah, it was everyone on a Discord server. You'd all be invited in. Only the four devs and a PR rep were speaking over a presentation they were live streaming to us. Quality was really bad. So they were trying to show us gameplay, but because it had to be live streamed through Discord, it looks like crap, which means they have to tell us, it looks like crap, I promise it's really pretty, which is a really tough thing to try to sell to media.
That's a really hard thing to tell someone. I've been in that situation and that's not fun.
Yeah. But I think I love previews. Previews have always been my favorite thing to write in the games industry, in part because you don't have to get all critical and analytical with it. You can be fun about it. I
they're
feel
the
like
best to read as a developer as well. It's always a nice time reading previews.
I think I might have spoken about it on this show, though. When I had to write my Mass Effect Andromeda preview, it was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, because I was like, I didn't like it, and the gamers are going to hate me for not liking it, because before this point, nobody has said a bad word about this game. So I was like, I'm just going to write facts. I'm just going to write the objective facts and no opinion whatsoever.
It contains a menu where you can lower the volume.
It's pretty much exactly what I did.
You're able to save your game.
There is a character creation menu that appears to be extensive. I did say that I thought the faces looked like The Sims 3, not even The Sims 4, which was probably the harshest thing I said, but it's still brutal. To get back to how preview events are working now, the thing that I didn't like about it is I love being in the room when a preview is happening and being able to throw a developer a question and have them like show you or talk to you really candidly. And like one of the best preview experiences I've ever had was the first time I saw Dreams, which I think was in 2015, 2014 at Paris Games Week. And I just kept being like, well, can you do this? And they were like, yeah. And I was like, could I make this? And they were like, yeah. And I was like, how about this? And I just kept trying to like, I'd be like, could I make a song? Can I make Guitar Hero? Can I make an RPG? Can I make an MMO? And they kept saying yes, 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 yes. And it's that experience of just being there and watching them be like, excited about the fact that I'm excited about the fact that there was nothing they said no to. You know, one of the only things they ever said no to me on when Dreams is concerned is that they
copyrighted
didn't think
music.
they didn't think that they could have characters that could were four-legged. And now people have made them. They were like, we don't think it would work in that game. We think we can only have two-legged characters. People figured it out. It's so cool. But basically
quadrupeds are hard, though.
Yeah, that's what they call them, quadrupeds. So like, we don't think we can make them. People have made them, and they function perfectly. But losing that from a preview is like... You love seeing devs be excited. When I saw Baldur's Gate 3 recently, and the cinematics are so pretty, and they're watching all of us, intentionally staring at all of us while the cinematic is happening, not looking at the projector behind them, so they can watch people for the first time see their stuff. Losing that is a huge bummer. I feel like it's just like got to be much less motivating for those teams, that now they're just giving an info dump on a Discord server where we're all muted and we don't want to ask any questions or react audibly so that we're not interrupting anyone else on the Discord server. So I think it's taken like just that one it was efficient, but I feel like it took a lot of the like love and passion that a developer could have expressed out of that happening. And I think that will probably hurt a lot of previews for the next 6-12 months. They also had a Q&A segment afterwards, but again, because everyone's on Discord, you can't see when someone else is trying to ask a question. Just not a lot of people ask questions, which maybe it's just a thing that will take us some time to figure out. But for now, yeah, that's one aspect of media that I never thought about that I'm sure during E3 is going to be a really weird ride.
What gives me hope? What gives me hope is if you look at, I for my sins, I really like some like American late night TV hosts. I really enjoy like Seth Meyers and stuff, and watching all of them like leave work, and the first couple of like, cause they're all doing some of their segments and kind of show parts like from their living rooms, watching the first episode where it's like on their webcam, like cameras like this because they don't really know what's going on, and like they're not, and the jokes aren't landing because they've got absolutely no audience to kind of, these are guys who like their entire experience is working in front of a crowd of 300 people, 400 people. To then see in literally the course of a week now, those have become hyper polished. You know, they've worked out the cameras, like they're at like a level where they're on a par with like you on a bad day, Alanah, right? Like they're like a weak YouTuber now. They're like a YouTuber on a bad day. And
it was funny to see John Oliver. He had a couple of episodes without an audience.
Dude,
so just no laughter.
I couldn't deal with it. That bothered me. That was that was not good at all. They were obviously, the team was trying, but like it was worrying and troubling. That was the point where for me this thing almost veered into like bad environmental art.
Dystopia.
The whole thing. Yeah. I went to the supermarket the other night, and in the UK we're on lockdown. It's essential trips and fitness only. And I'm going to like the supermarket like once a week, getting a shop, getting back, just basically minimizing opportunities for transmission.
We're the same here in LA, right, you guys? I haven't left in a week.
Oh, is that where it's at in LA now? I know in America it varies from state to state, presumably.
Yeah.
And it's not, I don't think it's enforced by the police. It's more like...
it's enforced by the police.
Yeah, San Francisco is. I imagine we'll be there any minute now.
Bluntly, hopefully, probably, given the science. Yeah. But the weird thing was just going into the supermarket, and like literally on the newspaper, there's a newspaper on the floor that said something like, it didn't say the end is nigh, but it said something like, it was pandemic hits crisis point, with like a newspaper billowing in the wind. And I was like, this is a bad movie I'm in right now. Yeah. This is terrible.
I mean, some of that's interesting though. Like, so one of my, I don't know if I've ever really even spoken about this publicly because it's not something I think will happen, but my post games media goal for a really long time was to be a late night talk show host, and I specifically wanted to do it because I used to watch a lot of late night talk show hosts, and I specifically wanted to do it for like, instead of just Hollywood stuff, specifically for nerd stuff. So where someone else would have some other actor on, I would specifically have video game actors or game directors or whatever, but still have like late night talk show host format.
You're in the dream. This is the dream.
But like I did stand up intentionally with the plan of like leading into that happening, and like exploring that whole thing is like a thing that I'm like, maybe I'll do eventually. But in my head, it's always been like, but women can't do it. And, but TV will probably be dead by then. And like I had all these like things in my head that were deterrents. And now I'm like, I should take a look at how
I think honestly,
talk show hosts are doing it.
go and watch like the talk show hosts trying to do your job and see how much they're struggling. I think it would be good for you to see that. Like, I think it definitely demystifies this. There's a lot of magic that happens when someone's on a stage. We assume
it's so much easier to be funny when there's a crowd. Like, that's the thing I don't think people realize.
And 10 writers, by the way.
True. Of course, trying to be engaging when you're streaming by yourself is not something that's easy to do, and I feel like I so often catch myself like playing a game that's difficult and not wanting to be bad because then people will be angry at you for being bad, but at the same time trying to answer complicated questions and have coherent sentences, and I don't think people realize how hard that is.
I saw you apologizing for downgrading the difficulty on Doom the other day, and I just thought Alanah's got a completely different life to me. I play easy Doom all the way. Doom doesn't have higher difficulty levels.
Even Doom 1 I play on Nightmare. I love hard Doom, but there are loads of games that'll be like easy, like Titanfall 2.
But when you've got people like throwing questions, when you're trying to maintain a conversation with your audience as well, I can't imagine how you do it.
It's tough. It's a tough thing to do.
It really is. I got a lot of shit when we were doing our playthrough of The Last of Us because there's what people don't understand is there's so much that's happening, and the studio that we were at, because there's lights and there's everything else that's happening, it was super hard to see the screen. I've got production in one ear. I've got Nolan in the other. I've got Drew that's calling out stuff. Just unless I was like, guys, we're almost at 45 minutes when you start kind of like looking at breaking this up. And I'm like trying to do this. And it's been 3 years since I've played the game. And so it's not fresh to my memory. But I think the beauty of this right now is what I'm seeing happen is by and large, there is a level of forgiveness and understanding that people have, and lower production value. There's more of a connection and a resonance one-to-one, because it's like, okay, you're doing the same thing I am. It felt weird to see someone still in a big production. I'm like, hey, you're supposed to be home right now. What are you doing? Life isn't normal right now. So if I see something that isn't normal life, it's actually not didactic. It's off-putting for me. So I think
narrative dissonance.
There we are again. See, now we're on brand.
Every episode, got to bring that up.
Got to get it back. Got to get it back.
It's like watching Star Wars with me.
It's like watching Star Wars. They were ahead of the game because they shot Mandalorian all inside in a small room, right? They're set up.
They could still technically make that show if you had one person on set.
Every episode is
still running it out,
and it's just the Mandalorian just looking around.
I mean, that's basically
Baby Yoda.
The show.
You can have Baby Yoda, right?
Music.
Coronavirus can't transfer to Baby Yoda. That's what it is. That's the scientific consensus right now. We're not proven, but it's the consensus.
You don't want to advertise something that's not true, Mike. That's
true. I apologize for giving bad advice about. Please look after Baby Yoda.
This is the internet, you guys. Let's have some level of integrity.
Don't need that.
It sounds like Alanah's wrapping us up.
I am. We didn't even get to the topic of what I wanted to talk about today.
Next week.
Yeah, we got time. So thank you all for joining me. I hope everyone's doing well, and everyone who's watching back home is doing well. Like I said, we are weekly every Friday for the next little while, or as long as our schedules allow for. I'll keep everyone updated. I'm Alanah Pearce. Thank you for joining me. Austin, Troy, and Mike. We'll see you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.